English translation 341st contact. Wednesdays, the 2nd April 2003, 23:57 hours.
I am pleased that you could get here so fast. Be warmly welcomed, my friend.
The pleasure is also mine. Be greeted. There are still some ambiguities regarding the statutes and bylaws, Florina told me.
Yes, that is why I asked you to come back here, so we can clear everything up. If it is okay with you, we can do this work right at the beginning.
As you wish, dear friend.
All right, let us sit here on the couch and pull the wheeled table over to us. When we have revised everything, I would like to ask you a few more questions, if that is all right with you.
Of course, because I am not in a big hurry. So let us begin then.
Those were all the points to work on. Thank you for all your efforts. If I may now start with my questions.
Certainly.
It is about the war in Iraq. Do you know when it will end and what the consequences will be? Do you have any information about this by looking into the future or by probability calculations?
A look at the future has shown that the collapse of Saddam Hussein's dictatorial regime will officially take place on the 9th of April, when the Americans storm and take the Iraqi capital Baghdad. Unofficially, however, the regime collapse will occur before the Americans occupy Baghdad. But this does not mean the end of the war itself, because in urban areas of Baghdad and in various other cities, fighting will continue until everything falls under the control of the Americans and the British. But both the Americans and the British will be mistaken about the Iraqi people, welcoming them joyfully and with open arms. Scenes intended to prove the contrary are only fake or accuse Iraqi citizens of conflicting natures, who for the time being are or will be happy that Saddam Hussein's regime no longer exists, while on the other hand, they are worried that the Americans and the British now control Iraq. The majority of Iraqis want to be free of American and British interference, which is why there will soon be major unrest, with the Shiites' Islamic orientation in particular making a big splash. Through the criminal war of the Americans and the British, they will be freed in the coming days from the dictatorship of the murderous Saddam Hussein, which has oppressed them for decades, but the people will not tolerate the foreign powers in their country. It will be the Shiites, in particular, who will want to proclaim a fundamentalist divine state in Iraq, which is said to have similarities with the one established by the Taliban in Afghanistan, which brought unspeakable suffering to the population. So there will be a resistance against the Americans and the British among the Iraqi people, which they did not expect, and which will bring them much trouble and disaster. Iraqi and terrorist liberation organizations will emerge to oppose the occupying forces. And if the Shiites actually come to power, then the mullahs will have the word and power as fundamentalist religious leaders, which in turn is tantamount to a dictatorship. But how the whole thing will turn out in the end, we have not yet explored, so I cannot yet give an explanation. In any case, however, there will be a general resistance from the Iraqi people against the occupiers, which will lead to very evil and disastrous riots and will cause many deaths among the Iraqis and the occupiers. America will also make threats against other countries, especially Syria, etc., because America is becoming more and more open in its role of seeking world domination, which will create bad blood in many places, especially in the Islamic countries, with the Arab countries leading the way.
The President of the United States, the criminal George W. Bush, and Tony Blair of England crawling behind him, and all those who cry for war with them have been lying about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction. But this has not been proven to be true, so that America in particular now wants to justify itself by saying that such weapons still exist in Iraq, but have simply not yet been found. That is why the Americans now want to send around 1,000 American military experts to Iraq as weapons inspectors, in order to find such weapons of mass destruction after all.
Which they cannot find, however, because since the first Gulf War, none exist any longer.
But if I know the Americans, I do not mean the good and righteous American citizens, but the war and human rights criminal elements of the government, the military, and the citizens who are howling along with them. They will still find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Not of Iraqi origin, however, but secretly and criminally smuggled into the country by the Americans, in order to be able to find them and claim that their murderous and criminal war was justified. And if there is no other option, they will certainly also lie that Saddam loyalists, arrested by the American troops, have betrayed the locations of the weapons of mass destruction camps. Or the Americans simply claim that Saddam Hussein destroyed the weapons of mass destruction shortly before the beginning of the war, in order to be on the safe side. If one knows of the rotten machinations of those irresponsible Americans who are screaming for war, revenge, retaliation, death, and the devil, and secretly strive for world domination with all murderous means, then this is probably the upcoming way to justify the Second Iraq War or Gulf War. And in justifying itself, America has always been great, for this was already the case when they slaughtered the Indians and kidnapped black humans in Africa, who were shamefully enslaved, abused, and finally often tarred and feathered and cruelly murdered in all possible wises. But nobody in the world, or only a few, think of this. Quite the contrary, because very many pro-American people crawl slimily into the backside of the USA and do not care about the bestial stench that is coming out of it with all those irresponsible ones who do not care about any right and any humanity. To say nothing of the fact that they approve of all murderous and criminal machinations, just as they do with Israel and Palestine's criminals of humanity and their murderous actions. And the fact that America itself is the very power on the earth that has the most and deadliest weapons of mass destruction, and that the violence of this power can wage war against all other countries and beat them into submission is probably out of the question. And those who do not do so will be mercilessly annihilated. So America slowly but surely secures world domination, with all the peoples of the world watching inactively or sneaking into America's evil-smelling butt. But whoever does not see this, does not recognize it, or simply ignores it inactively, or goes along with the criminal actions, is either not able to recognize the real truth, is stupid as hell, without initiative and indifferent or even criminal in his or her thinking, feeling, and acting. But those who assume their responsibility must stand by the truth and speak it openly in order to combat the existing evils, crimes and murderous machinations of those powerful ones to whom both true peace, true freedom, humanity and love, and the good of the individual and of all humanity are not worth a damn. And to act in this wise has nothing whatsoever to do with politics, as lunatics and half-wits otherwise assert. For the whole of such action is the sole and exclusive duty of every human being who assumes his or her responsibility towards life, towards himself or herself, and towards all fellow human beings. But whoever cannot or will not understand this is stupid and foolish and not worthy of leading a life at the expense of all those responsibly conscious humans who strive for true peace, true love, and true freedom and harmony.
Your fears regarding the smuggling of weapons of mass destruction cannot be dismissed. And also with your further remarks, you hit the truth in every respect very accurately. But the unreasonableness of the majority of the Earth humans will probably not thank you for your true words of reason. Few who are devoted to reason will appreciate your words.
In regard to the looting in Iraq, I have my suspicions, too, that looting is not only by the Iraqis, but also by members of the American army, who will specifically steal irreplaceable Iraqi art treasures and sell them to America and elsewhere.
Your assumption corresponds to a fact, because such machinations has taken place by American and British soldiers since the beginning of the war, but of course this is concealed.
Then another question regarding SARS. Is this the disease Ta was talking about on the 3rd of February 1995?
That is of correctness.
And do you know what the origin of this disease is and where it comes from?
Yes, we have clarified these matters. The fact is, which will of course be vehemently denied by China, that this lung disease was caused by experiments in a secret laboratory for biological weapons in the southern Chinese province of Guangdong. The pathogen is a coronavirus mutation that was released in a laboratory accident and transmitted to humans.
The newspapers are talking about a plague and epidemic. Does this term correspond to what the disease is?
No, it cannot be spoken of a plague or an epidemic, because for the time being, despite the virus mutation, it is an actual disease. However, there is a risk that the disease can quickly become uncontrollable and spread if rapid and containment measures are not taken. If this does not happen, there is little that can be done to counteract the disease. The whole situation is made worse by global tourism and trade in goods, which can spread the disease worldwide.
It will probably have dire consequences and become a disaster if nothing decisive is done, and if a drug is not soon found that can cure the disease or be effective as a vaccine.
There is a very good chance that the whole thing will take on bad forms or end quickly.
Then there is a lot to be anticipated in this regard. Then another question. Can you tell me how high above Earth our tiny monitoring disk floats?
That is no secret. The latest device is in a stationary orbit at an altitude of 867 kilometers, measured from the middle surface of the Earth.
Aha, it seemed to me that it was about 800 kilometers. Now tell me, do you have any knowledge of what North Korea actually wants in terms of resuming its nuclear program? Are they really going to produce nuclear weapons, or are they just going to build nuclear reactors?
Secretly, North Korea has had nuclear weapons for years. But this could be concealed so far because no official tests were carried out.
Oh, I see.
Yes, but now, my friend, I would like to talk to you in a different and purely private wise.
Suit yourself. At the moment, I have no further questions to ask.